Welcome to the Monday evening edition of Talkin Ball here at On Texas Football, brought to you by our friend John Donovan at Longhorn Wealth Management. CJ, I read your topic this morning on Texas Football with some interest. A couple of deep dives you did on performance for Texas last year in a couple of different manners. One was their first drive efficiency. And what I mean by that is what happened with Texas's first drive of every game. Pretty revealing stats here. Let me read them out to you, okay? And then we can talk about exactly what you think it means, what I think it means as well. Texas had the ball 14 times in 14 games for their first drive. In that, the results of the drive you have down here and have charted: 8 punts, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 turnover on downs, no field goal attempts. So literally 8 punts, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 turnover on down. That's success basically on 4 of 14 times your first go round. What did you make of that when you were looking at that stat and trying to plot it all out?
Yeah, well, it was, kind of that conversation about the Sarkisian script. And, we see Texas at times a year ago get out to really hot starts and kind of, accumulate a 3 or 4 score lead and put teams away pretty early. Or you see Texas kind of slow out of the gates, right? You look back at Rice, wasn't as quick of a start as you would have liked. Wyoming kind of lingered around into the second half. There were a few others later on in the season where you're sitting there thinking, on paper, Texas is a much better team than who they're playing against right now. So what's the issue? And I know that getting out to hot starts is big in college football, right? It kind of sets the tone for what the future of that game will entail. And so I kind of took the deep dive of, well, we know that Sarkisian has a great script. How often is it that when he gets the ball first, his offense and the Texas Longhorns storm down the field and they put points on the board? And actually, it wasn't all too often. They only average about 2 points per opening drive, right? 28 points over 14 first possessions in 2023. That's not a great success rate, at least not what you would expect for a Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers offense, and kind of surprised me a little bit. So I went through each opening game drive, whether it be home, away, what kind of play calls they were, run, pass, personnel. It was interesting. And so the big thing that I kind of took away with, Bobby, is pass attempts are called about 75% of the time.
But before we go to that, I want to say this, because that's maybe the bigger piece that I want to go. 4 of 14 is not a success rate. It's not very successful, period. But I want to say this: the 4 touchdown drives on the initial drives were three of them came in blowouts.
Right.
Okay, so maybe putting the pedal to the metal early was indicative of a potential blowout. Kansas, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State, all blowouts for the Longhorns. Those are 3 of the 4. The other one was Houston, that started out like a blowout until they changed their defense at the last second. Now, let's talk about this, because let's go in and discuss what you're talking about with pass attempts. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. That is John Donovan, president of Longhorn Wealth Management Group. As a proud UT alum, John served 15 years as a Dallas, Texas Exes board member and is now helping lead the relaunch of the Collin County Texas Exes chapter up there in the DFW area. It's his Longhorn pride that led John to brand his own firm, Longhorn Wealth, and dedicate it to serving his fellow UT alums and employees. John's a certified financial planner who has spent more than 30 years providing investment, retirement, insurance, and estate planning services and solutions to Longhorn families and friends across the nation. So to receive your free 90-minute consultation to explore how Longhorn Wealth can help you and your family secure your own financial future, simply call the Longhorn Wealth crew at 972-707-4900 or schedule an appointment online at longhornwealth.net. Hope everybody, John wishes everybody hopefully a safe hurricane down in Houston, by the way. You wanted to make sure we pass those thoughts along. All right. Hey, CJ, let's now go to what those first drives comprised of. And this is what you're getting at. You mentioned earlier, 75% of first drives were pass plays. Is that accurate? How do you want to bring that and talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was interesting, right? You expect, that complementary run-pass balance with the Texas offense. We hear about it all the time in the offseason around this time. Who's going to be the 1,000-yard rusher for the University of Texas or a Sarkisian offense? Well, you say that because there has been balance. There has been great success on the ground. You just don't see it all too often with opening drives. And I think part of that is the philosophy of Sarkisian being a former quarterback, understanding how important it is to get in a rhythm early, right? It's not sitting here, taking shots down the field all too often, though there were a few on these drives. But Bobby, to me, it's all about seeing completions, right? It's seeing your star point guard have a ball go through the hoop on a layup on a fast break, just to understand, that he's got it that day. And for Quinn, what was really interesting to me is 6 times this year, or in 2023, the first play of the game for Texas was actually a screen. So it wasn't a pass down the field. It was just, let's get the ball out quick. Let's see how the arm's feeling today. And let's just see what our playmakers can do. Now, I think teams kind of hit on that a little bit later on in the year, right? Oklahoma, first play of the game, 2-yard loss. BYU, 5-yard loss. Baylor, 5-yard loss. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, maybe it's a little predictable, but at the same time, you have seen the success later on in the game as a result of some of these pump fakes and goes, some of these wheel routes as a result of giving a look to a screen out of the backfield. So it was surprising. Out of the 76 total plays that Texas ran on its first possession in 2023, 58 were passes, 18 were rushing attempts. And of those 18 rush attempts, Bobby, 7 came on the second overall play of the game. So there's a bit of a trend there. Sarkisian likes to get the ball up quick for its quarterbacks, and he likes to, kind of bounce back a little bit with a rush attempt there as well.
Yeah, and when you're talking screen, here's the reality of it. A lot of people my age, when they think of screen, they think the running back delay out of the backfield. We're talking about wide receiver screens. Right. The one against Alabama where CJ Baxter lined up and on the out as an outside receiver, they got him the ball quick. That's a wide receiver screen. So there's a number of different types of screens. It's not the prototypical one that we're talking, kind of that delayed screen to the running back. I want to ask you this because the other thing that I thought was interesting that you mentioned here that really kind of caught my eye, 75% passes. Is that, to me as a coach, one of the things that you want to do early in drives, in games, is get your quarterback's arm loosened up. Get his rhythm down. Allow him time to kind of see and understand what's going on in the defense. Now, I will say this: the early part. Just take the Oklahoma game for example. That didn't look so hot. No. to your opinion, one of the one interception on the first drive was actually against Oklahoma that we discussed. But as that game got going, Quinn Ewers lit up like a Christmas tree. He lit OU up like a Christmas tree. So my point being, some of that is a coach's idea of, okay, I want to get these short, quick throws out so my quarterback gets some timing down, he gets the feel of the game, etc. And a screen's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to further that point, Bobby, look at what Texas did when Malik Murphy was the quarterback. I look back a little bit to the Kansas State game. It started with an RPO, another RPO again. It's all about getting those guys a little bit of a feel, a little bit of a rhythm. In the 2 games that Malik started last year, it was 10 of the 11 snaps on the first drives were pass attempts. And you're sitting there thinking, well, why is that the case? You have a backup quarterback, a guy who's not ever started a game before. Surely they're going to sit in there and pound the ground. They're going to let Jonathan Brooks, CJ Baxter, Jaden Blue get their fair share. I think, to me, Sarkisian's one, going against the grain of that, kind of public perception of what's expected to happen. But 2, you have a first-time starting quarterback. Why wait until it's a pressure third down for him to get his first opportunity to sling the rock? And again, in that Kansas State game, what was the biggest talking point at halftime, Bobby? Well, Texas was up by about 20 points, and Malik was slinging the rock all over the field, right? He had the long touchdown to A.D. Mitchell. He had another big completion to Jordan Whittington over the middle. To me, it's all about knowing who your quarterbacks are and what gets them going, right? How important those spring scrimmages are, and to see kind of the flip switch for those guys. Obviously, bring that over into the fall. That's very important. And Sarkisian, in my eyes, is at least acknowledging what gets these guys, clicking a little bit on the field.
Don't forget that key 4th down conversion to Malik Murphy had late in that game to Jatavian Sanders. If he hadn't thrown it as much early, would he have been as good late? Sark knows what he's doing on offense. I really believe that. And so as I'm looking at these numbers right now, CJ, and we're kind of dissecting how each drive began, et cetera. Let's talk a little bit and go a little bit deeper and talk about the use of motion and the unusual shifts he used in those categories. Talk a little bit more, because you really did a deep dive on this. Explain what you found out and what you kind of uncovered.
There's all sorts of different looks. And I was actually a bit surprised, right? When you look at the use of motion, right? Sarkisian does it a lot. There aren't many play callers and offensive, wizards, if you will, that uses motion more than Steve Sarkisian. First drives, I thought he did a tremendous job of switching up looks. And there'll be 2 plays that we hit on a little bit later, but he uses jet motion very well. And what jet motion is coming straight across in front between the quarterback and the offensive line, more times than not at a full speed, so you can get across the other side of the field. Oftentimes that was used from your H-back or your slot wide receiver on one side of the ball to get across and become, in a way, a lead blocker to the new side of the new strong side of the field for a wide receiver over there. Return motion was very often used as well. That was probably the second most used motion that we saw in return. Again, more times than not, your tight end is coming across the line of scrimmage, more so at a slow-paced jog, and before the ball is snapped, he's returning back to the side that he was in the direction in which he originally was at. That's normally your kick-out block. If he's not kick-out blocking, again, going to be a lead blocker on a screen. We saw that at times when Texas was, trying to establish the run later on in drives. So interesting there. Obviously, orbit motion, when you come all the way around the quarterback, that was a big part of it. Exit motion, which is the running back sitting right next to the quarterback, being sent out on a, basically just a straight horizontal line, parallel line to the line of scrimmage, getting out there and just kind of being a guy that linebackers have to key in on. So behind them, space opens up as well. Bobby, one really interesting play to me was late in the year against Texas Tech, right? Texas at times went into 31 personnel. They didn't do it too often, but they had 2
running backs. Oh, they did almost like a straight T formation of sorts.
Full house. So they got one. If I'm the quarterback, got one on my left, one on my right, and one directly behind me in a pistol kind of formation look. Right. Instead, they had one to my left and one to my behind, and I faked the orbit motion to Keelan Robinson behind me, carry out the play action, and dump it back down to Keelan to my left. And that's exactly what Quinn and Sarkisian drew up when they were in the red zone. Texas only had 5 plays, Bobby, on 3 trips in the red zone the entire first drives in 2023. That's not often. But again, one of those drives was a 30-yard run by Quinn Ewers, 4 touchdowns. You would have liked to have seen those numbers rise a little bit more, but 3 touchdowns out of 5 plays once you're in the red zone. Pretty impressive efficiency right there.
Let me ask you this, because I don't know stats. I don't follow them as closely as you do. What's Sark really hoping for there? Obviously, he wants 14 out of 14 touchdowns, right? But what's realistic? 7, 6, something like that? I mean, 4 seems awfully low. What do you think a mid-range stat would be, or based on your knowledge there?
Yeah, I actually looked at it the other day when I was originally starting this, and there's no true data point for college football, but the NFL, like 40% of opening drives leave points on the board at some point. So if you take what Texas did in the NFL, I know they're not apples to apples here, but Texas still behind where you would expect the average to be. I look at it and I say, at least if you flip field position, you should feel good about your first possession, right? Rice, only 8 yards. Wyoming, you lost 5 yards. Baylor, 16 yards. So there's times, again, where you're looking at what Texas was able to do on its first drive, and it just wasn't up to par. TCU, 8 yards. You go 3 and out. Obviously, Oklahoma, you don't gain a first down. That's not great for your momentum and the rhythm that you hope to establish. For me, if you can get to midfield and hopefully put points on the board, that's great. If not, if you're able to pin teams deep in their own, end zone to start, like they did against Alabama when they downed the ball on the 3-yard line, Bobby, then you're starting to say, all right, at least we have a positive out of this first possession.
It's interesting. You're talking about what Texas did versus NFL norm, and there's not clearly. You said there's not a stat in the college football, but 4 of 14 is 28% for those
Right.
keeping track. No field goals in that, whereas the NFL you did count field goals, or they did count field goals for the 40%. But NFL typically a lower scoring game than college football too, on average, and so. That's interesting because look, Sark is I want to say this. There's no doubt in my mind Sark's really bright offensive coach, right? I'm not debating that, but your data flies in the face of conventional wisdom that his script is all that, when frankly the script, at least the initial one, didn't result in that many points this past year.
Yeah, no, again, I think with the tools that you have, the quarterback that you have, and the offensive mind that you have, you'd expect to see more points on the board. But again, I think what's most important here, and I know I mentioned flipping field position, putting points on there. Third on my list here is just getting an idea of what looks you'll see from the opposing defenses in certain formations. And so what was also very notable is about 45%, give or take a percentage or two, was of passing play calls were the result of RPOs or straight screens or those quick missile screens out to the wide receivers we were talking about earlier, Bobby. So again, it's about letting your quarterback understand what the look of the defense will provide for him later on in the game. While, again, if you don't put points on the board, at least now you got the tablets on the sideline. You can stroll on over and say, yeah, when we get into a kind of a too high look, when we have our jet motion coming across to set up a 3-by-1 look, now we know what that formation is going to spin down to in case we do want to come back to an RPO or a wheel route or whatever comes down later on in the game plan. At the end of the day, Texas, I would expect to be much better in first drives, first possessions next fall.
Okay, that's going to do it for that portion of Talkin Ball. I have some other updates that we want to talk about. Michael Fasusi, offensive lineman out of Louisville, announced he's got some news coming out on Friday. Now, we did not think it was going to be his commitment at this time. We think he's waiting until either later in July or into August. CJ, what's the latest on the big offensive tackle out of Louisville?
Yeah, I would be a bit surprised if that's a commitment. But hey, Bobby, we did see, a DFW 5-star, not too long ago, kind of speed up his decision and say, all right, I'm ready to make my commitment. So we'll see, of course, with Michael Fasusi. I do believe it is an Oklahoma-Texas battle right now. And with Lamont Rogers choosing Missouri, this recruitment becomes all the more important for both universities. And so it'll be interesting. I do think Oklahoma probably holds a slight lead at the moment. I think that they did a little bit of a better job when it comes to addressing what his interests were on official visits and kind of just tailoring to what he wanted to see a little. So that was an interesting takeaway for Michael Fasusi. But at the end of the day, Texas would love to have a 5-star tackle in another recruiting class, right? They've done a great job accumulating talent. He's the top guy in the state of Texas. You'd love to see him join the University of Texas's class, and Texas will absolutely be pushing, whether it be this weekend or beyond, for his commitment whenever it comes.
All right, good stuff. Also, a reminder, Kelshawn Johnson, wide receiver out of Hitchcock, changed his visit date to Wednesday of this coming week. Nick Townsend and Tanook Hines, young men out of Spring Decaney, tight end and wide receiver respectively, have moved theirs to next Monday, all because of Houston's onslaught of Hurricane Beryl that came through there earlier today. All right, one other thing that I do want to mention, CJ, and this is a big one. We're going to be a week from today, SEC Media Days start. Texas announced today who Steve Sarkisian's taking with him to that event. It will be Quinn Ewers, no surprise there. Kelvin Banks, no surprise there. And then he went with Jahdae Barron, young man that was actually at the Big 12 Media Days a year ago. All coaches get to bring 3 guys. Sark's taking Ewers, Banks, and Jahdae Barron for that Media Day event. Again, that starts next Monday and goes through Thursday. Steve Sarkisian, a week from now, and actually I think his time at the podium will be next Wednesday. So we'll be there talking to a bunch of people around the SEC, et cetera. A couple of programming notes tomorrow morning. We have Paul Feinbaum joining the show on Coffee and Football. Hope you guys enjoy that. Jerry Hamilton is also expected in Jacksonville, Florida tomorrow to meet with Jamie French. We don't know when he's going to be able to talk to Jamie, but we should have that. That's the talented wide receiver, of course, that everybody knows about. And then Jerry and you, CJ, have a recruiting breakdown as well. Also, you can get your news and notes from On Texas Football at ontexasfootball.com. Before we go, I want to say thank you one last time to our sponsor, and that is John Donovan, President, Longhorn Wealth Management. John's a proud Texas Ex's Life member whose wife and 6 siblings, all grads from UT. It explains why John branded his firm, Longhorn Wealth, and dedicated it to providing total wealth management solutions for Texas alums, employees, family, and friends. John's a certified financial planner with more than 30 years of experience and wants to offer every OTF member and fan a free 90-minute consultation to explore how Longhorn Wealth can help you and your family maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and secure your legacy. Reach out to him at 972-707-4900 or schedule an appointment online at www.longhornwealth.net. I want to say one final thing, folks in Houston. My parents live down there. They are without power. I know there are 1 million plus people in Houston still without power as we go to do this show today, thinking about each and every one of you and wishing you and the folks in East Texas now that I think are suffering through some of this as well, the best. So for CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. And this has been Talkin Ball.